Hello, listeners. Welcome to Audio Stories Library. Hope you all are doing good. Today we are to see Five Little Friends, episode number 4. One bright June morning, Mary said, "Let's go into the woods to play." "Oh, may we?" Betty and Peggy asked their mothers, and little Dot said, "Oh, please, may I?" and looked from one mother to the other. "Yes, let them go," said Mrs. White. "The woods are not far away and there is nothing to harm them there." So the four little girls started out. They went down a shady lane and through a meadow. Then they came to the woods and wandered about for a while. At last, they stopped by the side of a little brook that flowed merrily on its way. In a few minutes, shoes and stockings were taken off, and the children were wading in the cool, rippling water. It was lots of fun, but the water was very cold. Soon they were glad to dry their feet in the soft grass and put on their shoes and stockings again. "Let's make a tree playhouse," said Mary. "I'll show you how." So they set to work with Mary as leader. They found a hollow tree with plenty of room in it. Next, they gathered all the soft velvety moss they could find. With this, they made a thick green carpet on the floor. Then they made green moss furniture too. They had a bed, a couch, a table, and a chair. "We should have someone to live in our green mossy house," said Peggy. "Let's go to the meadow and gather some daisies and make little flower people out of them." So off the children went. In a little while, back they came with their hands full of flowers. Peggy was the first one to reach the tree house. She looked in and then began to laugh and called to the others to come quickly. "We needn't make any flower people for our house," she said. "It's already rented." And sure enough, there on the green moss couch was a fat brown toad. He was winking and blinking and looking much pleased with his new home. The children sat down to rest and watch Mr. Toad. All of a sudden, they heard a queer sound. Chip, 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 chip. It seemed to come from the bushes. "It must be some little birds," said Betty. "Perhaps it is a mother quail and her babies," said Mary. Very carefully, the four little girls peeped through the leaves and bushes. Can you guess what they saw? There, walking about in an open place in the woods, was Brown Betty, and running beside her and talking to her in turkey talk were 8 baby turkeys. How excited the children were! They all wanted to run to the farmhouse with the good news. But at last they drew lots to see who should go. "I will hold 4 daisies," said Peggy, "and each of you may take one. The girl who gets the daisy with the longest stem may run ahead. If you leave the longest one in my hand, I will go." "Yes," said Mary, and the other children may drive Brown Betty and her brood back to the farmyard. So they drew the daisies, and little Dot had the one with the longest stem. Away she ran as fast as her short legs could carry her. "Oh, Mrs. White!" she cried as she reached the farmhouse. "We found Brown Betty in the woods, but her eggs have all turned into little turkeys." While Mrs. White was laughing over Dot's way of telling the news, the other children came up with Brown Betty and her brood. "Dear, dear," said Mrs. White, "as the eggs have turned into turkeys, I will let the money I promised turn into a picnic. Let me see. Today is Tuesday. Will you be ready to go on Thursday?" "Indeed we will," cried the children. "Thank you so much." On Wednesday morning, Mary woke up very, very early. Then Mary woke Betty and Peggy and little Dot. They all dressed as quickly as they could and hurried out of doors. The sun was just rising, and the sky was a beautiful red and gold. The dew sparkled on the grass, and in the tree tops the birds were just beginning to chirp and call. "Where are you going, my pretty maids?" laughed Mr. White. "We are going a milking, sir," she said. Mary replied. Then each little girl took a tin cup and followed Mr. White and Billy to the pasture where Bonnie Bill and Bess stood waiting. Billy let down the bars and the cows came into the barnyard. Mr. White milked Bonnie Bell and Billy milked Bess. The girls stood near and watched. How Mr. White and Billy laughed when little Dot said, "Oh, is that the way you get milk on a farm? We get ours out of bottles." Before milking time was over, each little girl held her cup and had it milked full of fresh new milk. At first, the children thought they would carry the cups home and drink the milk for breakfast. But they were so hungry they couldn't wait, so they drank it standing in the barnyard with Bonnie Bell and Bess looking at them with soft, kind eyes. That afternoon, Mary had some work to do, and Betty and Peggy went for a walk with their mothers. Little Dot was tired from her early morning visit to the barnyard. So she took a book of fairy stories and went out into the nearby field. She settled herself cozily under a big maple tree and began to read. After a little while, the book slid from her hands. Her head nodded and then rested on the grass. Her eyes winked and then closed. She must have slept almost an hour when she woke with a start. Something very soft and moist was moving over her nose and cheeks. It felt almost as if her face were being washed with a sticky cloth. Dot opened her sleepy blue eyes and looked right into the big brown eyes of Dawn, Buttercup's baby calf. "Oh, oh!" cried the little girl. "Ma," replied Dawn as he frisked away. "You are a dear little thing," Dot called after him. "But I wish you wouldn't kiss me with your tongue all over my face." The morning of the picnic was bright and clear. There was great excitement in the kitchen and pantry. Mrs. White and Molly, the maid, were fixing the lunch, but the four little girls couldn't help popping in every few minutes to take a peep. The two other mothers peeped too. What they saw made them wish that they were to be invited to the picnic. But this time, only the four little girls who had found Brown Betty were to go. At last, the lunch was packed in 4 baskets and off the children went. On their way, they found some wild strawberries. They stopped to pick them, and Mary showed the others how to make leaf baskets to hold berries. They gathered broad, flat leaves and fastened them together with little twigs. Then they went on until at last they came to the loveliest spot you ever saw. It was an open space with trees all around it. Nearby was a little bubbling spring. The children set their baskets in the shade and began to romp and play. They played hide and go seek and a new game which they called Echo. Can you guess how to play this game? At last, they grew tired and hungry and began to unpack their baskets and to put their lunch on a mossy spot near the brook. Such a feast you never saw. Everything a child likes best came out of those baskets. How the four children did eat and eat and eat. And when they had eaten and eaten and eaten until they could eat no more, there were still some good things left. Let's rest a while, said Mary, and perhaps we will be hungry again. Shall I tell you a fairy story? Oh, please do, said Betty, and Peggy and Dot echoed together. Please do. So Mary told them of a fairy ball where all the little fairies came out of their flower cups and danced by the light of the moon. Wouldn't this spot be a lovely place for a fairy ball? Said Peggy when Mary had finished the story. I wonder if there are any fairies in this wood. I know how we can find out, cried Betty. We can give the fairies a party. But they only come out at night, said Dot, so we couldn't see them. But, replied Betty, we can make a feast for them, and if the next morning we find the feast is gone, we shall know the fairies really came. Oh, let's do it, cried Dot and Peggy. And Mary said, if we want the fairies to come, we must make a magic ring of flowers. That will be lots of fun, cried the children. So, for the rest of the afternoon, they were very busy indeed. They went to the meadow and gathered clover blossoms. Then they sat down on the moss and made a magic ring. When the magic ring was placed around a lovely mossy spot, they began to set the table for the feast. We'll give them cake and some ripe strawberries, said Betty. But fairies eat dewdrops served on rose leaves, said Peggy. When they come to a party given by little girls, they eat just what little girls give them. You will see, said Betty. So the moss table was set with leaf plates and on each plate were a ripe red strawberry and a fairy-sized piece of cake. When everything was ready, the children danced around the magic ring 3 times to make it more magic. Then they packed their baskets and went home, feeling very tired but very happy and much pleased with the picnic. End of episode 4, 5 Little Friends. So, we will now move on to the vocabulary. First one is woods. An area of land covered with trees. Second one is meadow. It's the grassland. Third one is wandered. Wandered is to move around or just walk leisurely without any aim. Brook, it's a small stream. Wading, wading is walk through something. Rippling, it's nothing but a movement that resembles a series of small waves. Like how if we throw some stone in the water, then small waves are formed, right? That's called rippling. Stockings, it's a female garment usually worn in the feet and legs. Hollow is the empty space within. Moss is a very small green or yellow plant that grows especially in wet area. Couch is a furniture where more people can sit, nothing but the sofa. Toad, amphibian with a short stout body and short legs. It's just another type of frog. Quail, a small brown bird. It'll be more or less like a sparrow. Dew, tiny drops of water. Like in the grassland, in the early morning, if you just go for a walk, you can feel that the grass is all quite wet. That's nothing but the dew drops. Chirp is the sound of the birds. Barnyard is nothing but the farmyard, the area in the farm. Cozily, comfortably. Fastened, tied, to tie something. Bubbling spring. Spring is nothing but the underground water that comes up, and bubbling is nothing but the way they say that it is coming out of the underground. So it's bubbling spring. Romp, rough energetic play. Fairy ball, dance party. The dance party by the fairies is called fairy ball. Clover blossoms, a small plant with pink or white ball shaped flowers. That's all for today. Thank you for listening to this audio. Let's see what happens in the next episode, if the fairies really had their feast or not. So, if you like this audio and would like to subscribe to Audio Stories Library, please do press the subscribe button in the YouTube channel and also the bell icon next to it. Thank you. Bye for now.